we go. Bez Hashem, today's daf is Masechta Menachos Daf Mem Daled. And we're going to start from Daf Mem Gimel Amid Beis, about 10 lines from the bottom, 12 lines from the bottom. Tanya, we learned in a brisa. Hoyer Rab Meir Oimer. Rab Meir used to say, okay, let me make this a little bit bigger. Okay, Hoyer Rab Meir Oimer. Rab Meir used to say, why did God choose the color of tcheles from all the colors of the world? From all the colors of the spectrum, God chose tcheles. Why? The tcheles is similar to the ocean, to the sea. It has a similar color. And therefore, when you look at your tzitzis, it will remind you of Kriyas Yamsuf. That's what Rashi says over here. Tcheles will remind you of the nisim that happened to the Jewish people by the Yamsuf. Then b'yam doimeli rekia. Then you'll associate the heavens to the ocean, and v'rakia lekisei hakavod. And once you're thinking about the sky, you're going to think about the chair of God. So that's the idea: is to think about God sitting on His throne. Shenema. How do you know God's color of His chair is similar to the color of the ocean? Because the pasuk says, the Torah describes when they saw God, so to speak, they saw under His foot a brick of sapphire, right? And it looked like the heavens. And now, Oksiv, Kimari Evan Sapir Demus Kisei, that the shape or the color of the chair of God in the Nevuah had the look of sapphire, and sapphire has the sapphire has the look of the heavens again, and so therefore you see Kisei HaKavod is the heavens is the water, etc., etc. So there's a lot of mental associations that are supposed to be done when you look at your tzitzis. Tanya, we learned in a brisa, and this is, I think, Sheldon, you were discussing. Meir said, what's more important, the tcheles or the lavan, the white? So gadol onchish lavan yosim onchish tcheles. If someone doesn't wear the white tzitzis, he gets a greater punishment than somebody who's not wearing the tcheles. Because the tcheles, you could always have an excuse that it's too expensive, it's not easy to find. But white tzitzis, what's so hard with that? A king said to his two servants, one of them, he said, bring me a stamp made out of tit, dirt, all right, or mud. And the other one, he asked for gold, a seal of gold. Nobody brought anything. Who's going to get the more severe punishment? The one that said that he was told to bring just a little bit of mud and didn't bring. It's so inexpensive, and you could be kaim a mitzvah, so and you don't. So there's a bigger punishment for not wearing your white tzitzis. They say the Vilna Gaon, before he passed away, he was so nisragish from this world that he held up a pair of tzitzis and said, with this tzitzis, you can become such a great mitzvah, and it's pennies. Tanya, we learned in a brisa. We're talking about Rab Meir. Rab Meir kept saying things. Rab Meir used to say, another important obligation. A person is obligated to say Baruch Atah Hashem 100 times per day. More is God's asking, requesting for you to say more, as in Mayar, 100. In that pasuk, actually, there's 100 words, 100 letters in that pasuk, actually. So that pasuk is a hint that a person's obligated to make 100 brachas a day, which we do generally on a regular weekday. But on Shabbos, our Shemoneh Esrei are cut short. So what are you supposed to do on Shabbos? So the Gemara tells us, Rav Chia Berei de Rav Avya b'Shabsa u'b'Yom Tova, on Shabbos and Yontiv, Tarach u'Mamale b'Spar Gmoke Gode. They went out of their way to buy extra smelling flowers or spices. U'Megadim. U'Megadim is like exotic foods, certain exotic foods that that they made extra brachas on them so that they could have they could do the 100 brachas even on Shabbos. Tanya, we learned in the Brisa. It's interesting. The following should be in Masechta Brachas, but it isn't. It's found in Masechta Menachos. A person is obligated to make 3 brachas per day. The following 3 brachas: Eluhein, Shloya Sani Goy, Shloya Sani Isha, okay, and Shloya Sani Bur. God did not make me a goy, a woman, or a bur is somebody who is a bur. It's an English word also, B-O-R, but that's somebody genetically who's socially off. So somebody, you have to make that bracha every single day. So Rav Acha Yaakov Shamil Brei Tahavakam Avarach Shloyasani Bur. Rav Acha heard his son make the bracha the way Rabbi Meir said, that a person is supposed to make a bracha Shloy Asani Bur. Amalei. So Rabbi Acha said to his son, Kula Hai Nama, you should make a bracha that God did not make you a bur. So Amalei Valamai Mavarach. So he asked his father, there must be a substitute for that bracha. Shloy Asani Aved. You should make a bracha Shloy Asani Aved. Says the Gemara, Hainu Isha. That's the same idea of making a bracha of Shloy Asani Isha. What's the point of making Shloy Asani Goy? Because you're thanking Hashem that you're not a goy, that you have mitzvahs. Then you say to Hashem, you didn't make me a woman, because a woman is only chayiv and partial of the mitzvahs. So what do you gain by saying Shelo Yasani Aved? And of Eved, a slave, a goyish slave, Eved Kanani is obligated in the same mitzvahs that a woman is obligated. So why should I make a bracha Shelo Yasani Aved? Answers the Gemara, Eved Ziltfei. We go to Amid bin Dalar Amid Aleph. Eved is more shameful, is more degrading than a woman. In other words, an Eved cannot marry a Jewish woman. An Eved Kanaini cannot marry a Jewish woman. So he is limited. So that's why you're actually thanking HaKadosh Baruch Hu for the privilege of being able to marry a Jewish woman. So you make a brachas like this, Shlo Yasani Goy. Every morning you make a bracha Shlo Yasani Aved, and then you make the bracha Shlo Yasani Isha, and you go ascending order. And basically the theme of those 3 brachas is that, thank God, I'm born as a male Jew who's obligated in all these mitzvahs. But you don't want to say, Baruch Hashem, that you gave me the Torah, because maybe I'm not keeping the Torah. So the brachas were set up in the negative way, that I'm not a goy, eved, or a woman. The only thing is that, and this is a question you should think about, why should you make this bracha every day? I mean, you were born a goy, you were born, 70 years ago. I mean, how? So you should make a bracha once in your lifetime. You're not a woman. Yesterday you weren't a woman. So why should you make this bracha every single day? Says the Gemara. Let's go further in the Gemara. We'll discuss it later. What is the chilazon? Its body has the same makeup as the floor, as the seabed. And its shape, somehow its shell shape, is like similar to a fish. Okay, assuming it's the snail, so if it matches the seabed floor, but it also has some characteristics that it's shaped like a fish, and it comes up from the ground once in 70 years, it has a migration towards the beach, and with its blood, you make the color tcheles. So since during the times that it's not 70 years, you have to I guess deep sea dive to get it. So the fichach, therefore, dam of yikarim, it's a very expensive item to obtain. It's very expensive. Says the Gemara, Tanya, we learned in a brisa. Amar Rav Nasan, ein lechol mitzvah kol. Here is one of the most fascinating Gemaras in all of Shas. A story, hard to imagine how this could happen. But the Gemara says, Amar Rav Nasan, ein lechol kol mitzvah kala shaksuba b'toyrish ein matan schara that there's no easier mitzvah in the Torah, the mitzvahs say that you don't get the reward in this world, and I don't even know how much reward you're going to get in the next world, but certainly something you can't imagine. I want to tell you the reward that somebody got from the mitzvah of tzitzis. Masa, there was a story, there was a person. Let's assume that this person is a young man, not married, but one thing he was careful in purchasing a pair of tzitzis. Shama, he once heard, there was a zoina, that lived in the islands of the sea, and she was so pretty. She would take 400 gold coins as her payment. He sent her 400 gold coins, and she set a time that they were going to have znus. When the time came for this man, to this bachar, whatever he was, to have to come for his appointment, he sat by the door of the house. So her maid came out and told the lady, the person that sent the 400 gold coins, he's right here at the door. She said, let him come in. Nichnas. So the man came in. She set up 7 beds, shel kesef, 6 made of silver, and 1 of gold, 1 on top of each other. Sulam shel kesef, and between each one of these beds there was a ladder made of silver. The elyoiner shel zav, and the upper bed, I guess, was made of gold. As we said, that's where she put the upper bed. So I understood it to look like this picture over here, where she's on top, and he has to climb the ladder of the silver ladder between the silver beds to get to the gold bed on top. I don't know why this is all important. Also, V'yashua Gabel Yoinik Shuhi Aruma. She sat on the top of the top bed without clothing. And he got up and climbed up to sit without clothing next to her. And his 4, as he's, I guess, climbing up the ladder, he didn't want to climb up without his tzitzis. The tzitzis, the strings, hit him in the face. Nishmat, he let go. And sat on the floor. And she also sat on the floor. Amr Loi, she said to him, Gabal shel roimi, I swear according to the Roman well-known Roman governor. I'm not going to let you go until you tell me what blemish did you see with me? Why did you stop? Amallah, he said to her, Havoid, I swear, I never saw a beautiful woman like you. Hashem gave us one commandment, that's tzitzis. And God wrote in the mitzvah of tzitzis, I am your God twice. Why twice? I'm going to punish you if you violate commandments, and I'll reward you for keeping the commandments. And I visualized them when they hit me in the face, that they were like 2 sets of witnesses, 4 witnesses testifying against me. Amr Loi, she said to him, whoever taught you must have taught you well. I'm not letting you go. What is your name? What is the name of your city? What's the name of your teacher? Because everybody can teach, but to teach that it means something to you and you could put it into practice, I would like to know the name of your rabbi. And what's the name of your school? That you're learning Torah. He wrote it down and gave it to her hand. She stopped what she was doing, and she stopped being a zayna. And she divided up all her asses. Shlish lemalchus. The Gemara says she gave a third to the government. Ushlish la'aniyim, and a third she gave to poor people. Ushlish not lebiyad, and a third she took in her hand. So she came with money. Besides being a beautiful woman, she came with money. Chutz ma'osim mitzayis, except from those beds. And again, she came to the Beis Medrash of Rav Chia because apparently this guy learned in the yeshiva of Rav Chia. Amrullah, she said to him, Rebbe, Sabay Live Yasuni Gyoris, command on me and make me a ger, a gyoris. So he understood, Rav Chia understood that perhaps she wants to become a ger because she fell in love, infatuated with one of her students. And because of that, that's not enough to become a ger. Amrullah, he told her, Biti, my daughter, maybe you're infatuated with one of my students, and that's not enough to become, for me to allow you to become a gioris. No, she said, no, it's completely l'shem shamayim. She took out the written document in her hand and gave it to him, and showed him and told him probably the whole story with his student. And she felt that if his student was such a Yirah Shemayim, she wants to select that student to be her husband. Amalah. So instead of the rabbi rebuking his student for doing something like that, he went over to the student, tapped him on the shoulder, and says, you have a visitor here. And go and take possession of your purchase. And that's your new wife. Those beds, these beds that she set up for him, be'isr, when she was a goy, she now became his wife, and that became his wife's. She set it up beheter, with permission. This is the reward of the mitzvah of tzitzis in this world. And I don't know how much the reward will be in Olam Haba. And this story was told over by Rabbi Nassan. Very fascinating story. A lot of questions, but let's move on. Amar Rav Yehuda said, Tala She'ula, Kol Shoyshim Yoim Petur Min Tzitzis. A borrowed talis, the first 30 days, it's potter from tzitzis. But then afterwards, if you borrow a talis beyond 30 days, then you have to put tzitzis on it. Obviously, if it's four-cornered garment. Tanya Nami Achi, same idea. Adar bepundiki Beretz Yisrael, Asoiche Bayis bechutz laaretz. If you rent an apartment in chutz laaretz, so Kol Shloshim Yoim Potter Min Mezuzah. From the first 30 days, you're not obligated mezuzah. From there on, you're obligated. If you rent a house in Eretz Yisrael, you're supposed to make a mezuzah right away. The yishuv Eretz Yisrael, because of the yishuv of Eretz Yisrael, and therefore, after you put it there, you're not allowed to take it there, even if you leave it. So we want Eretz Yisrael to always have Jews living there. So since they made an obligation that you always have to have a mezuzah there, once one Jew lives there, he's not allowed to take the mezuzah away. So it's going to automatically be re-rented to another Jew. So that's why a Seicha Bayis Beretz Yisrael should right away put a mezuzah there. Tefillin sheyad enima akavis. We go back into the Mishnah. The Mishnah says, if you just have the tefillin shel yad, you should do the tefillin shel yad. Don't put on the tefillin shel rosh. Amrav chizda loishan sheyesh loy. We're talking about a guy who has the tefillin shel yad and a tefillin shel rosh, and we're telling him, look, if you just put on the tefillin shel yad, you also get a mitzvah, even if you did not put on the tefillin shel rosh. Aval einlay, but if you don't have in your bag a tefillin shel rosh also, ma'akeves, then you weren't even. We tell you, don't even put on the tefillin shel yad. Amr loy. So they told Rav Chizda, Amarat, did you really say such a thing? Amr lahu. So Rav Chizda said, loy, I never really said that. Because why should I say that? Elaman the less late trey mitzvahs. A person only has the tefillin shel yad and does not have the tefillin shel rosh. What are you going to tell him? Chad mitzvah nami loy levid. He shouldn't do one mitzvah at least. So no matter what, even if you have the tefillin shel rosh or you don't have the tefillin shel rosh, if you just have the tefillin shel yad, just put it on. Imikar Maisava. What did Rabbi Chizda say? What was he thinking before that? Gzeira Shemi Yapasha. Because we're afraid that if we allow person who only bought a tefillin shel yad to put the tefillin shel yad on, maybe he's going to be negligent and not put the tefillin shel rosh. He says, "Oh, I'm getting a mitzvah anyway, so why should I pay money for the tefillin shel rosh?" So therefore, we tell him, "Don't put on the tefillin shel yad until you purchase a tefillin shel rosh." But then Rav Chizda said, "What are you going to do? Let him put it on the tefillin shel yad, and hopefully he'll have the seichel and the feeling to buy a matching tefillin shel rosh for that." Amar Rav Sheshes. Rav Sheshes says, "Kol she'eina meniach tefillin oiva b'shmoine asay." Whoever does not put on tefillin gets 8 assays. Kol she'ein like tzitzis bebigdoi. If you don't have a tzitzis on your 4-cornered garment, oiver b'chamisha asay, you get 5 assays. V'chol koyin she'ein oila duduchen oiver b'gimal asay. So you get 3 assays. So you got to look at the Rashi, and Rashi lists off the psukim. If you don't put on tefillin, how do you get 8 violations? And if you don't put on tzitzis, you get 5 violations. But kol she'eina mezuzah b'pischa, if you don't put a mezuzah at your door, oive b'shnei asay, you get 2 violations. Uchsaftam. It says chsaftam by the 2 parshias of Shema and v'hoyim shmoya. Therefore, you get 2 violations. V'yamar Shlokish says, kol haminiach tefillin menarch yamim. Whoever puts on tefillin gets arichas yamim. And part of the introduction before you put on tefillin, you say that with the schus of tefillin, I should get arichas yamim. Shenema, because the pasuk says, Hashem. We go to Amid Beis. Hashem aleichem yichyu chol behen chaye ruchi v'sachlimeni v'hachayeni. So those that carry the name of God with his tefillin shall have arichas yamim. That's a pasuk in Yeshaya. So that ends the whole sugya of tzitzis and tefillin. Now we move back to discussing mincha. Every carbon mincha, every time you shechted a carbon, you brought with it, you'd say you shechted a carbon shlamim. So along with your carbon shlamim, you have to additionally bring a meal offering through the whole flour onto the mizbeach, and also wine, right? That's also, you brought a wine. But let's say you only could afford, let's say you only bought the soilis vashem, and you brought the flour and the oil. So ein ma'akvin esayayin will not stop you from bringing will not stop you if you don't have the soilis and the shemen, will not stop you from bringing the wine. So if you just have the wine and you don't have the oil and the flour, fine, then just bring the wine. And if you don't have wine and you just have the flour and the oil, bring that. Again, when you shech the carbon, you're supposed to bring 3 extra things besides the animal. You have to bring the flour and the oil and wine. But if you don't have either or, the wine or the flour, you just bring it on the mizbeach. That's fine. Hamatonas. If you're obligated to sprinkle 4 times on the mizbeach, shal mizbeach hachitzin, let's say a carbon chatas, ein ma'ak v'zu azu, they don't stop each other. In other words, if you just sprinkle one sprinkling on the mizbeach, that's okay. You don't have to do all 4. Obviously, the mitzvah is to do all 4 on every corner, but if you just did 1, that's fine. Tana Rabbana. We're going to do it this way. Umin chasam and eskeim. So according to the Rebbe, according to the Tanakama, havi mincha, first bring the flour offering, and then you pour the wine. Rebbe says zevach nusachim, havi zevach havi nusachim. First bring the carbon, the animal, and then bring the wine, and then you bring the flour. So according to Rebbe, the flour comes after. So let's skip down a little bit because the Gemara says this is the result of the machlokes, and then we'll end in a half a minute. The kuli alma loy pligi. Everybody doesn't argue. Rebbe and the Chachamim don't argue the mincha v'achakach nesachim. When you first you always bring the flour. You throw the flour and the oil on the mizbeach, and then you pour the wine. Diksiv oila umincha. The Torah says first bring the animal, and then you bring the flour offering. Keep ligi b'boim b'fnei atzman. The argument between Rebbe and the Rabbanan is if someone donated a flour offering and as a separate offering, just for flour offering. And then he also promised to bring a wine offering to the Eibishter. So what should you bring first? The Rabbanan hold that when it came with an animal, first you bring the flour offering, and then you bring the oil, and then you bring the wine offering. So bifnei atzman, even if you're going to donate by itself without an animal, mincha, first you bring the flour, and then you bring the nesachim, the wine. Rabbi says, Hasam hu the idea the aska bachila gamalei lekulam milsa bachila. Rabbi says, buy a regular korban, since you started with the animal, shechting something of food, so then you follow up on the mizbeach with another food item, the flour, and then you do the wine. Aval, but if someone made a promise to bring flour and oil, flour and wine, so then we say bring the wine first and then bring the flour offering. Why? Because wine is more important. Since when they would pour the wine, the Levium in the carbon Talmud would say shira, so wine has some chashivish. So then give God the wine offering first and then give him your flour offering. Then finally, the last thing we learned, Tana Rabbanam, from here we learn. Let's, how do you know that anytime you're supposed to sprinkle on them as outside mizbeach? If you just do one sprinkling, you were yaitze, you did the job. For example, carbon chatas, you have to touch all four corners, and if you just did one corner, how do you know you did the job? Shnema, the pasuk says, the dams of achecha, the blood of your carbon, yishafek, should be poured on mizbach Hashem lekecha, and yishafek means just make one pouring, and already you were yaitze the carbon. So that's how you know that idea from the Mishnah. Okay, so ends Daf Mem Dalet. Okay.